Hello and welcome to Dylan Knows Special Prime Time again. It seems like I have one of these almost every Saturday. I should just make it a regular event and not just special events. But today is a very special day. It is, as you can see by my costume, my face anyway. I'm just hot. That's why I'm wearing this today. We're doing our Batman 75th anniversary show. But I know what you're saying out there, but Dylan, didn't you guys already do one? Yes, we did. But because Batman has such a vast and myriad of history and just craziness, we just got a little sidetracked on certain things and we missed a lot of other things. So we said, you know what, let's do two. So we're going to do two. And if we need more, we will do a third one if we need to. I don't think we'll have to, but you never know. But it is Batman's 70th anniversary. Actually, I believe the actual anniversary was back in May, but due to technical difficulties, we could not do it at the end of May. But now it is beginning of June. It was almost exactly 1 month ago that we did the first one, so I figured, why not? Part 2, may as well do it. So this is Dylan Knows, Batman 70th Anniversary episode Part 2. And with me, as they were the first time, is my usual co-host on Dylan Knows Comics, Mr. MJ Khan. Hello, MJ.
Hey, how are you?
Good, how are you?
I'm doing excellent.
Do you have a special cocktail ready today or no?
Well, no, not really. It's just generic.
Ah, very nice.
Yes. It's straight hard stuff, but you know, it's probably what Batman nurses on after a night of, cruising the tunnel of Gotham or wherever he goes. I don't know.
And also, real quick, as always, I want you to plug again. You are a writer. What do you write?
I do have a novel out. It is called Earth First, and I think you can see it in my tagline there. And it is a novel about our first meeting with superheroes and what happened from that.
And
the title.
And you can pick it up anywhere. So
yeah,
basically,
anyway.
basically. And with us again for the second time is the master of the laser monkeys and Oompa Loompas, and the guy who has single-handedly declared war on winter, and I think won. Yay!
Yes.
DH Gamer's here. Hey, DH, what's up, man?
It's good to see you guys. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, we had a blast last time, so we had to have you back again this time. So, real quick, before we get into our discussion, I was teasing some stuff earlier about a certain contest.
Yes.
This is only for the 3 viewers we have, so you 3 viewers, I'm sure we have more out there. But basically, on MJ and I's last show, last Sunday, we had on Nicole and Jay, who go to conventions all the time, and they get tons of swag and stuff, and they are very nice about giving us swag to give away to you guys. So I had to think about it a little bit, and I said, you know what, I got my Batman show coming up on Saturday night. It's connected to comics, so even though the swag is not Batman related, but it doesn't matter, it's still comic related, so that's all that really matters. So I figured what we would do is to reward people for watching my show, which I know sounds a little...
You're rewarding, though. You're not buying them. You're rewarding viewers, not buying viewers. Okay.
Rewarding, yes, thank you. The good distinction. Yes. Rewarding viewers for watching my show and being loyal viewers of it. During the show today, listen very carefully to what MJ and I say. DH, unfortunately, we only have 2 items, so... And MJ was on my show last time, so I figured... And what's going to do is at the end of the show, when the show is over, done, it's not going to be, okay, the very last thing we do live. No. As soon as the show's over, we're going to say goodnight. We're going to shut down the broadcast. I will tweet out 2 questions. One that has to do with me, one that has to do with MJ, about what we talked about today, about Batman. So it's about Batman. It's not what is Dylan's favorite color and what is his favorite car. It's
right.
Not any of that. It's something that we talked about on the show, and the answer will be, if you were paying attention and you were watching, you'll be able to get the answer right away, and you just have to tweet that in, and we will send them out. Now, for those who didn't watch my show, you're not going to win. I'm just kidding.
And you're going to be really sorry that you didn't watch it.
But last week we got a view of what the swag is. Now it might not be great, but it's still something cool to win free stuff, and it's great. The two pieces are the one that's going to be connected to MJ's question is going to be the IMAX Godzilla poster, which was the Japanese-looking, done like in a painterly Japanese Asian art style, which was excellent. It was an awesome poster.
Very.
So that's if you get the question for MJ right, that's what you will win. And for me, there is actually going to be a Saved by the Bell comic. Yes, based on the 1980s, 90s, whatever, kid TV show that, with some pretty hot chicks on it, so it's okay to watch when you're in college. And still, maybe nowadays, that might be a little bit more creepy since they're high school. But it's going to be a comic, and I believe what Nicole said was that I think the actor who played Mr. Belding is the writer of it, and it's going to be either a actual page of artwork, or I think it's a reproduction of some of the interior artwork in black and white, with it signed by, I believe it's Mr. Belding and maybe the artist. I'm not 100% sure. All I know is it's a piece of art from the Saved by the Bell comic, and I don't know if it's original art. Probably isn't, but it still might be something. It is signed, so that's kind of cool too. So that'll be to answer my question. So as I said, wait till after the show's over, and then I will tweet out the question for me, for MJ.
There you go.
You've been paying attention. You answer it. You tweet it. Now, the same person cannot win both. Okay.
So it's going to be hard between the three of you.
It's up to 4 now, so okay.
Yes.
The battle's getting to be a big one now. So,
Yes.
All right. So keep that in mind. So listen, pay attention, and now it's time to talk Batman. Batman's 75th anniversary. Dun dun dun. I need a drink now. Oh hell! I forgot. No, I did mention you, DH. No, yeah, DH is here.
Yes,
All right.
yes. That's all right. I'll just sit in the corner quietly. No.
Play with your monkeys.
I have my coffee. I'll be okay.
Nice. And this show's already starting off great. Also, real quick, we do have the Q&A up, so if you want to ask us questions about Batman, or you want to ask us questions about Batman, or you want to make a Batman comment on your own about what your favorite stuff is, let us know. So, last episode, we focused on why we like Batman as a character, his top villains, and his movie and television career, with the exception that we missed out on the animated series, which is disappointing because the animated series is brilliant. So, since let's have a logical progression from the last episode, we're going to start talking about the animated series. I believe it came out. The animated series came out in the early '90s. It came upon, I think, the heels of the popularity of the 1989 Michael Keaton, Tim Burton Batman movie. So they got Paul Dini and Bruce Timm were basically like the showrunners who came on, and they wrote most of the episodes, and they had other people come in and write the episodes also. And Bruce Timm did a lot of the character design, stuff like that. So the two of them came on, and they did a fantastic job that they continued not just through Batman. They did, I don't know, about 3 or 4, maybe even 5 seasons of Batman. Then they went into Superman. They did Superman as well. Then they went into Justice League. And then they I guess, started falling apart, I guess, maybe around the time where the crappy Batman movies came out, and comic book stuff wasn't as popular anymore. But all those cartoon series, all those animated series are very popular with fans alike. I know Justice League Unlimited is one of tons of people's favorite Justice League cartoons ever. The Superman one was actually done very well, very similar to what Batman did, but Batman is the grandpappy of them all. It was a great series. They brought in all the characters, they brought in all of the villains. They brought Robin in, they brought Batgirl in, Commissioner Gordon, Harvey Bullock. They even did some stunt casting. They had Adam West play not the Gray Ghost, but he played the actor, an actor who played like the Gray Ghost or something like that. Right. In his show, which was kind of interesting to see him come on the show. And I don't know. It's just hard to say. The theme was done by Danny Elfman, who did the theme for the Batman movie, so it was sort of that logical progression from that, and it was the dark, the dark Batman that we're used to, but it wasn't as Tim Burton-esque as the movies were. It was very true to the Batman, what you thought of Batman at that time. The series it had its dark moments, but at the same time, Bruce was still able to crack jokes, be the funny Bruce Wayne, and they got tons of celebrities to come in and do the voices. It was fantastic. So, any discussion, guys, about Batman animated series? Any thoughts, feelings, whatever?
I mean, I would have to say that, to me, that is still one of the, I don't know, I guess the most definitive animated series that there's been on television. I mean, it was an amazing show. The film noir style of it, the Rogues Gallery. I mean, I think that it captured his villains so well. And a lot of them, it played on that sympathy that you have for them because they were just so crazy. I mean, I don't think that Clayface would actually translate to a movie maybe, but in the animated series, I mean, to me, he was one of the more tortured of his criminals, and I just really, really thought that it was very well done, the way that they handled those. And, one of my favorite episodes, I'll never forget, was, I think it was called Tiger Tiger. And, I don't know why, but I saw that episode, and I watched it over and over again. I thought it was like the greatest thing ever. But I do remember it had some really standout episodes, but that was one of my favorites of it.
DH, any thoughts?
Yeah, the series was just so brilliantly done. It was a level of quality we hadn't really seen, on, for animation on TV in a while. It was just absolutely brilliant the way they went ahead and had great stories. They had great voice acting, great animation. They put it all together into just what was, like MJ was saying, absolutely one of the definitive examples of superheroes, in animation. It was, it's absolutely fantastic. You mentioned about the Gray Ghost, for example. I thought that was a brilliant little nod they had to the '60s series for Batman when they brought in Adam West to voice the actor who had played the Gray Ghost, who was an influence on Bruce Wayne as a child. I thought that was pretty cool. But they did some great stories. Some of them were straight-up adaptations from the comics, even. Like some of the stuff with Ra's al Ghul was taken directly from Denny O'Neil's original stories in the early '70s. I thought that was just a great way to go ahead and expose people to this greater world that Batman had beyond just what you got to see in the movies. It was great.
And what was also interesting about it was they were able to fit in all the Rogues Gallery, even as the ones like, as MJ said, like Clayface. They also did like a ventriloquist, which normally probably wouldn't, translate very well in the movie theater. Also, an older guy holding a wooden dummy who talks like an old '30s gangster, and it wouldn't translate, but it worked out good. But at the same time, though, they were not beholden to always do, this episode we're going to throw Scarecrow in, this episode we're going to throw, Joker in. No, they did some standalone ones, which none of his Rogues Gallery might have showed up on, or they created new villains for them to take on. Like there was one I think I remember called the Underdwellers, I think, which was almost like a darker Oliver Twist, where it was a bunch of kids who lived under the sewer and were being forced into stealing by a Fagin type of character from Oliver Twist, and that was that was all the episode was. There was no, from what I recall, there was no like Killer Croc or Joker or anyone who was behind that. It was just some bad guy who just decided he's going to take a bunch of kids and make them his own personal crime spree, and say who's going to hurt kids, And yes, Michael Fiveson, who is on the Q&A, says Mark Hamill was a key part of the series. Yes, he was. His Joker was probably one of the best versions of the Joker. The voice, he got the voice down perfectly, and you have to give credit to the writing staff. They got the character down. And you had to back off a little bit of the psychoticness, but they were able to sneak in some dangerous stuff in there, that the Joker did. And I also always remember and I think we discussed this last show because of the horrible abomination that was Arnold Schwarzenegger as Mr. Freeze. The best Mr. Freeze story ever was Heart of Ice, which was one of the first season episodes of the Batman series. And it was basically as MJ said, also made the villains not just bad guys. You were sympathetic to their plight. And this is the first time that I really looked at Mr. Freeze in a different type of light before, because I'd always thought of him as just being some guy that shot freeze ray things. But this actually brought about a character that made you sympathetic for him, and we're hoping that he would succeed in the end. And I think Batman said something along the same lines also, that he hopes that he succeeds in the end or something like that. It was a good one. And yes, Mark Hamill, as we said, was great as the Joker, but Kevin Conroy as Batman is the definitive Batman voice. Yes. I mean, there is nothing. Not Christian Bale, not Michael Keaton, and yes, Michael Fison, thank you, the Rat King. He was the one who was in charge of the Underdwellers. That's right. Thank you very much. I knew there was not a villain behind it, but just a guy who called himself that. But Kevin Conroy has always been considered to be the epitome of Batman voice. There's Kevin Conroy, and then everybody else is below him, which I have to agree with, because it was great, and he had the voice down perfectly. And the thing is, you've got the gruff Batman voice without it sounding like nails on a chalkboard.
Yeah. He doesn't have the Bale throat cancer voice. Yeah, exactly.
And then he was able to differentiate it enough for Bruce Wayne to give him sort of that more upper, not upper register voice, so that you wouldn't even consider that someone who had this deep booming voice like Batman has could be Bruce Wayne, who has this higher level voice up there. And that was the good part about that too. They brought in Robin, Dick Grayson as Robin. They made him up to be more like the Tim Drake Robin, where instead of wearing the tidy green underwear, he had the leg things on. So he was a good Batman. That was Lauren Lester was the voice of that one. And they even brought in Batgirl later in the season, who was pretty good. And that was Barbara Gordon, not Alfred's niece, and not Alicia Silverstone.
No, she was not trying to steal money to save Alfred. No, it was Barbara Gordon.
And we also can't forget Ephraim Zimbalist Jr., who I think died the day of our first Batman show, and I forgot to mention it. I was so busy trying to get everything else there, so he passed away. So Ephraim Zimbalist Jr. as Alfred was, he was the good, caring Alfred. You got to see a little bit more of Alfred in his character, because Alfred's character is actually very interesting in the comics. He used to be like a spy. He was an actor. He knew his things, and you got a little bit into his psyche, I think, a little bit in the animated series, and saw him as not just some old guy, tottering around helping him out. I mean, Michael Caine did a pretty good job, and Alfred Goh did a pretty good job also, Michael Goh did a pretty good job as well, but they just didn't have that, what Alfred really was, that he was in the comics, where, Michael Caine was the closest, I think, because he was the youngest, but, he was, Alfred was an actor. He was a spy. He knew his stuff, and he knew what he was doing. So it was always so. Ephraim Zimbalist, rest in peace. Sorry I didn't mention you before. Heather T says animated series was one of the first U.S. animated series to go beyond the black and white good guys, bad guys, which is absolutely true as well.
Absolutely.
So that's good. So and then that leads into what I think is probably one of the best, if not the best, Batman movie of all time, which is Batman Mask of the Phantasm, which unfortunately was criminally mishandled by Warner Brothers, releasing it on Christmas Day with like 20 other movies that were coming out that way, and no one went to see it. I mean, the TV series was still going on, so I guess they were looking at it as like, well, why should we put this 2-hour or hour-and-a-half movie when people can watch the TV show for free? Well, the reason why is because it was treading very close to PG, if not PG. It was basically a adaptation of Batman Year 2, which we talked about a little bit last show also, with Batman's first real love coming back, and then the Reaper, who was the villain with the scythe, coming in there, and then the Joker was thrown in there, and the Joker was able to be a bit more psychotic in this than he was on the TV show, because you're able to do it. But you had all the characters come in. You had, all the voice actors. You had Kevin Conroy. You had Ephraim Zimbalist Jr. You had Mark Hamill. You had Stacy Keach was the voice of the Reaper. My favorite, Dana Delany. Delano, I think, was the woman who ended up being Lois Lane in the Superman.
Right.
And she was fantastic. She was fantastic in that as well. And you were also able to bring in Commissioner Gordon and Bullock and all the other characters from the TV series, and just on a wider screen. And it was criminally horrible that Warner Brothers did that, because it is a wonderful, excellent movie. It hits Batman to the core. It does not have a happy ending.
Right.
And it gives you a insight into Batman, and you truly believe that this woman probably could make Batman stop being Batman, which is one of the things he was talking about. And Batman had sex in this movie. You didn't actually see it, but you see the two of them, kiss, and then it spans the next day, and they're out on the deck, the veranda together, and they're just together. So Abe Vigoda his voice was in it also.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
Oh yeah, I forgot about that.
Oh, about him. I haven't seen that in a while. I'm gonna have to pick that up and watch it again. It has been a while since I've seen that.
So good. And that's the one thing where DC does really good, though. Despite the fact that they mishandled this movie, their direct-to-DVD movies are fantastic.
They really are.
Yeah. They've done some brilliant stuff with their direct-to-DVD animation, just brilliant stuff over the last few years. They've definitely had the edge for animation where Marvel has had the edge for live action.
Right.
No doubt.
I mean, it actually makes me wish that, that DC, that the crew that handles their animated movies would just kind of move over and helm the live-action, versions of Marvel. I mean, I would love to see that.
Love to see that, but I don't think they'll ever let it happen. No.
Because they've been doing fantastic. I mean, they did. I've lost track of them. When they first started coming out, I was trying to get every single one of them. I was trying to watch every single one of them, and then they just started flooding the market. It was every 2 or 3 months they would do a new one, and they're all ones that I want to see. But the thing is, the majority of them are Batman stories, because Batman is such a popular character. Yeah, there is one Wonder Woman one. There's a couple Green Lantern ones. There's some Superman one. There's a Superman Batman one, which is a straight up adaptation of Jeff Loeb's first story arc with the superheroes with President Luthor proclaiming Superman and Batman as being public enemies, and having Shazam or Captain Marvel and Captain Atom and all that going after them and attacking them. So they did it, and that's the good thing also. They do it in the style of the animation of the comic. So Ed McGuinness was the artist on the comic art, so they made the movie similar to his artwork, and they brought in Kevin Conroy as the voice of Batman and Tim Daly, who was the voice of Superman in the Superman animated series, to come in and do this one. So, and then they had what's his name? Who was the voice of Luthor? Fantastic actor. Sleepy Hollow. Clancy Brown. Clancy Brown is probably the best Luthor you're ever going to see, also, probably.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, they had these iconic voices that they've come across in those, and those people have now gone on to go ahead and voice the characters for so many years in so many projects. I mean, Mark Hamill and Kevin Conroy are still voicing those two characters now.
Yeah, it is.
And we're talking over 20 years, later.
And then on top of that, though, they are also able to give other actors a chance to have their swing at Batman. Also, they did the Dark Knight Returns. They did the 2 movies of Dark Knight Returns. They got someone else to do that. They did a Year One. They got someone else to do that. They did just a whole. There's the newest one is the Son of Batman.
Right.
Yeah, Damian is in there in that one, and they did the adaptation of the Justice League story where the bad guys discover all of Batman's fail-safes for the Justice League and uses them against the Justice League. So they did that one as well, and did just different actors to get a chance to Batman. But it's just there's nothing, you can't beat Kevin Conroy, and I really like Tim Daly as Superman also. I thought he did a really good job as Superman as well. So definitely go out there and check those out. Michael Fison. They should make Dennis O'Neil adapted movies. They really should.
They should.
He has some pretty good stuff out there.
Absolutely.
And part of it, what makes it so good is that it doesn't shy away from the material that's in the comics. I mean, I think that if they made a live-action version of these, they would be a hard PG-13, if not an R for some of them. And which is kind of strange when you think about it. That the animated version is willing to go much farther than the live-action ones do. So.
Absolutely. And then we forgot to mention this also because this is in there. They brought in Batman Beyond, which was the future Batman. And once again, Kevin Conroy is playing the voice of older Bruce Wayne, and they got the guy from Boy Meets World, the older brother, was the voice of Batman Beyond. And now DC is bringing Batman Beyond into the DC universe proper in the Future's End storyline. So, and that was, and I always remember that series I never really got into because at that point I was sort of in between college and my real life, starting my real life, so I didn't really get, not that there's anything wrong with it, I was just too busy trying to discover
it was just
what I wanted
timing at that point.
Yeah.
And then I remember the big snafu about, they decided to do a direct-to-DVD movie called The Return of the Joker. They brought Mark Hamill back to Return of the Joker, and there was a big deal about a scene where he tortures, the Joker tortures the Tim Drake Robin, on screen, and a lot of parents groups or whatever were against that, so DC ended up editing that sequence out. But that sort of ruins the story because Tim Drake's insanity from being tortured by the Joker is what leads, that is pretty much what helms the story.
Yeah, it's central to the whole thing.
Yeah, when you cut that, when you excise that, what is there? So it failed horribly. So then there was enough people, enough fans said, you know what, just put it back in there, re-release it as unrated if you want to, but just give us what we want, and they did, and it went on. So there is, both copies are out there now. So, but as I said, did either of you guys get into Batman Beyond?
I did a little bit. I thought that it was pretty well done. It was very much like what if Spider-Man was Batman in a lot of ways. Because Terry McGinnis was still the young kid in high school, and he had the same wisecracking attitude a lot of times that they should with the young Peter Parker. And even a lot of the villains eventually wound up being in the same mold as Spider-Man's villains. But one of the things that I thought was most interesting is they eventually found a way to tie in Mask of the Phantasm, Batman Beyond. They tied all of that into a storyline that they used as like the actual origins for Terry McGinnis then in a Justice League Unlimited episode later on. I don't know if either of you guys ever saw that.
I didn't see that. Wow.
Yeah, it's Terry McGinnis breaks into Amanda Waller's home after she's retired and says, "I want to know what the story is, for Batman. What is he to me?"
Yeah.
And as it turns out, I mean, it was brilliantly done the way they finally managed to put everything together into one thing. I won't go ahead and, since I know that you haven't seen it yet, Dylan, I won't spoil it for you. Seriously, if you have a chance, look it up. I don't know if you have a Netflix or not, but it's on there, and it's a really good two-parter there.
Okay.
Which I think that was a two-parter. I know they had 2 episodes at least with Terry McGinnis as Batman on there.
Now, I'm also trying to remember, was Batman in Justice League Unlimited also?
Yes.
So Kevin Conroy did him there too as well. I know that sounds pretty bad, but so okay. So any last thoughts about the animated series before we move on?
I think we got it.
I think we got it. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I think we're going to close the book now on the animated movie live-action aspect of Batman, and let's get into the comic part of it. But real quick, Michael Fivesen was not a big fan of Batman Beyond. He's Kevin Conroy. Kevin Conroy is the only good thing about Batman Beyond. Yeah, that's fine. It's your opinion. That's cool. I can't say one way or the other because I haven't seen it. So on that note, all right. So Batman comics. He started in comics 75 years ago. As a badass. At this time, I think he was like throwing people off roofs. He might have been carrying a gun. He was, it was the time. It was the time.
Things have changed a little bit, yeah.
They have changed. It was the time, and that's just how they did it. And then, there's the whole big thing about is Bob Kane the only? Should Bob Kane be the only guy credited as a creator of Batman, where Dick Sprang probably has a really good, claim to it as well. There's a whole. Well, I'm not going to cover that because, to be honest, I don't really know much about that stuff. Just from hearsay. But there are some some issues with Batman, and Batman, it was such a different period in the 30s and 40s that it's almost impossible to compare the two.
Right.
I do recommend, though, if you get a chance to check out some of the older ones. They have them in very easy to find stuff. They've got them in the archive collections. They're a little pricey, and then they also did a bunch of black and white. I forget what it was called, like the Batman Compendiums or something like that, where they did just everything was in black and white, wasn't in color, and they did all the old stuff in like a trade paperback, cost like $15, about this thick, and a whole bunch of them. So it's worth it to just see the difference between the lingo, the way the characters have gone from the 30s to now, and where they came from. Because it's always good to know where your villains came from, but also don't be surprised if you're like there, say, what the fuck am I reading? Batman? And the funniest thing, and this is the funniest thing, they have the meme on Twitter and Facebook, which is Batman slapping Robin. Everybody, the big slap, And then there's also his catchphrase in the 30s and 40s was Papa Spank.
What? No, I don't know that one.
Oh, you don't know that one? Oh man, there's a website out there. I forget what it's called, but it takes these little comic block, from the comics, the blocks from the comics.
Panels, yeah.
The panels, yes, thank you. And you're reading it out of context. It's pretty bad. But there are times when there's women like laying on his lap, and he's like saying, "Papa Spank," and smacking him.
Yes, seriously.
This just brings my whole, being disturbed by him to a whole new level. I can't.
Yep, Michael Fiveson knows what I'm talking about. He shot a vampire in the face in Detective Comics 32. So yeah,
Well, I mean, it was a vampire.
Well, that's true. Yeah, there is that.
I'm still stuck on the spanking thing. Now I'm starting to wonder what all is in that utility belt of his.
Oh!
Well, the bat paddle was a little too big to fit in the utility belt, and that's why he had to go to the large pouches again.
Probably invented the fanny pack.
I gotta find you. There's some crazy. There's some.
God,
and then
Yeah,
of
there's
course,
some funny stuff.
And then of course, when you get into the 50s with Seduction of the Innocent, talking about the homosexual undertones between Batman and Robin. That's once again that's an issue that is not really that big of a deal anymore. It was pretty big, back in the 80s and 90s, but the way things are nowadays, it's not that big of a deal right now. And was there some homoerotic stuff in there? It's possible, but I don't think it was, as I said, I don't think it was meant to be construed that way because it was a different time,
Right.
Yeah. That's how Dick Grayson became, Robin. He became his ward. And the whole story behind Dick Grayson becoming Robin. His parents get killed by gangsters who are trying to take money from the circus they're at,
right.
And Bruce happens to be in the audience and decides that I'm rich, I'm single, I could use some help, but this kid, I'm making it sound worse than it is. Yeah. What it basically is, he sees himself in Dick. I mean, he just lost his parents, pretty much the same way. I mean, Batman's parents were shot by a criminal. Dick's parents fell from a trapeze, onto the ground, 30, 50 feet, whatever, died that way. So he sees a lot of, him in Dick Grayson, and so he says, I don't want him to go down the same path I did, and ends up adopting him and becomes his ward. And so that's, I guess back in those days, wasn't such a weird thing to have a wealthy person adopting a wealthy single person adopting a younger boy. Not saying that there is anything homoerotic going on, or there ever was with anybody who adopted younger boys, or single men who adopted young boys back in the 30s and 40s, because there probably wasn't. Was there maybe a little bit, but in some cases, but in most cases probably not. It was just someone just was either too busy. He was rich, needed somebody to be his heir. He didn't have an heir. He didn't want to just leave his money to the state or whatever. One day have somebody so he did that. So that's the history of Batman. Then gradually in the '60s roll in, and the TV series comes on, and Marvel is starting to become a force to be reckoned with. So at this point, DC was starting to get really, really close. I think they wanted to cancel Batman because he wasn't doing as well. The stories were kind of weak, because all the creative people were over in Marvel trying to do something different that they'd never done before, and Batman had been around since the 30s. They would just keep doing what they were doing during that time. And, you get the fanciful stuff with, like, Batmite and Ace the Bat Hound and the alternate realities and
all the different colored costumes.
Exactly, all the crazy stuff. And then you had the 1966 campy TV show, which made Batman popular. Yeah, well...
It did, actually. That's actually what saved the character, I think, for a long time. That 66 series brought some people in and made them... it wasn't necessarily the typical fan that we associate with comics today, but it brought a lot of attention to it.
Well, it got his name out there to a whole new group of people. I mean, I can remember being a kid, and getting home from school and couldn't wait for that to come on at 4 o'clock or 4:30, whenever it came on. That was my introduction to it. That and the Super Friends. That's what actually made me go out and say, okay, you know what? I'm gonna start looking for some of these characters in other media and read about them. So
I think we talked about it last time. I mean, watching that show was one of the things that got me into comics. I grew up just outside of Philly, and when I was real little, I remember watching like the '50s Superman live action show, and then there was the '60s Batman was on, and then the '60s Spider-Man cartoon was on, and they were on like back to back to back, and that's what got me interested in comics to begin with. My mother used comics to teach me to read before I even was in school, because she saw how much of an interest I took in it. So.
And then we talked about this earlier. The '70s roll in. So does Denny O'Neil. And he comes in and he says, you know what? This isn't Batman. Batman is not the goofy, ne'er-do-well goofy. He's a dark, go back to the 30s. He's a dark, sinister force.
Yeah.
His job is to make the criminals fear him. So Denny said, you know what? Let's make him fearsome again. So they brought him in, and then you also got Marshall Rogers, the artist, coming in, came in and did some definitive stuff there, and then and then that's when Batman started arcing more into the darker aspect of Batman. And then the '80s come, and a little thing called Dark Knight Returns shows up, and totally changes the outlook of Batman again. And it was right around the time of Crisis. DC was in a desperate way, so they wanted to restart their whole universe to make it more online with Marvel, because Marvel was kicking their ass at that time. And so they said, we need some new people, and they were able to draw some people who had been big people at Marvel, like George Perez and John Byrne and stuff like that. They came over, and Frank Miller. He wrote Dark Knight Returns. Let's get him on Batman. Frank Miller says, I got one more story I want to tell. It's called Batman Year One. And that pretty much said, we're going to use that as the template for Batman from now on. So he did his 4 issues, he left, and then that was what became a Batman. So then we had a bunch of different creative teams in there, and Batman has gone where he is now. And then he went through his renaissance with the movies in the 80s, went back down with the horrible movies in the 90s, and then came back into prominence.
Schumacher!
That never existed. It never happened.
Yeah, exactly.
It was like a bad dream.
Acid trip is more like
the Batman and Robin movie is the reason that Batman Sub-Zero went straight to video. It was originally going to be a theatrical release, and then with the bad reviews and how everybody just wanted to go ahead and burn that film, they decided there was no way they could put it out in theaters. That's why it went straight to video.
Which is a shame, because that's actually pretty good. It's not Mask of Phantasm good, but it still gives another view of Mr. Freeze, which is pretty good, and it was actually pretty good. And then we got the 2000s with Batman Begins, all that, and then we made up to through the Grant Morrison era, and then we've got the New 52 and Damian and all that, and now we've got Scott Snyder and all that. So that's the history of Batman right there. So let's go back and let's take a look at some of these creative teams before we get into Robin. My more creative teams, I think more along the lines of what really influenced my Batman reading habits was, because I never really read Batman in the 70s. I read him more in the '80s, right around the time of year one, and then all through the '90s. And the main reason why I loved him in the '90s was the creative teams. We had Alan Grant and Norm Brayfogle, who was, they were on Detective, I think, at the time, or Batman. They were one or the other. Another one was Chuck Dixon and Graham Nolan was another creative team that I really enjoyed also. Chuck Dixon is one of the best Batman writers, I think, of the '90s and into 2000 a little bit. He came on and did some, good work with Birds of Prey, which is a kind of a spin-off of Batman a little bit, but an all-female team with Batgirl being, at the time being Oracle, Barbara Gordon being Oracle, bringing about a team of Black Canary, and then eventually Huntress coming in there as well. And then Nightwing also was a pretty big deal too. And then in that same time, they introduced a new Robin. We had the whole Jason Todd thing happen in the '80s, which we can actually talk about now, where after year one, they did like a two-issue kicking Dick out of there. So he came in, just so say, reestablished Dick was Robin for a while, and now he's Nightwing in the Teen Titans, and then he quit. And then Batman had to find another Robin. He finds Jason Todd, who is different than the Jason Todd was in the '60s, I think, '60s and '70s. There was a Jason Todd back then, and he was a bit more. He was almost like Dick Grayson light for the most part. He was chipper, happy, oh golly gee williker, stuff like that. Well, they decided to make him more of a dick, which is fine. It gives Batman a chance to mold him, clean him up a little bit. So he was a kid living on the street. His dad was a drug addict, whatever. His mom nowhere to be seen, or vice versa. Right. Mom was a drug addict, dad's nowhere to be seen.
He was actually stealing the wheels off the Batmobile when Bruce found him.
Yep. Yeah, and he was.
Yeah.
And so Batman said, you know what? Here's some kid who's had a hard life. Let's get him, in here and help him out. That's what happened, because that was led to Death in the Family. Was he didn't know where his mother was. His dad had raised him, I guess, and his dad was a drunk and criminal, stuff like that. So then Jason comes in. He's kind of defiant. He's kind of a dick, and I guess that might have been the way that Jim Starlin was writing him, because at the time Jim Starlin was the writer and Jim Aparo, I think, was the artist. And it was just I think Jim Starlin didn't like Jason Todd. I think he said in an interview one time that he really did not like Jason Todd, and he was hoping that where he was going with this Death in the Family story, that Jason Todd would be so much of a dick that everybody would want him to die. So then they came up with this scheme where the 4-part Death in the Family story, Jason discovers his mother's in Qatar or
Ethiopia,
Qatar or whatever, Ethiopia, wherever, and the Joker's involved as well. And Jason doesn't listen to Batman and goes off to find his mother, and unfortunately also finds the Joker, who beats him almost to death with a crowbar in front of his mother, and then blows him up. And Batman reaches him at not enough time. He reaches just as he sees it blow up. So then it was up to you. You had to call one of two 1-900 numbers. It cost 25 cents or something like that for each call you made, because the 1-900 numbers were very big at that time.
Yeah.
And you could call and see if you wanted him to live or if you wanted him to die. And of course, because Jim Starlin had wrote him as such a dick, everybody said let him die. Well, not everybody, but most people said let him die. So they killed off Jason Todd via telephone.
It was actually a close vote. It was only separated by a couple hundred votes, actually.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then they turned Batman into spiraling into, he feels guilty. He needs a Robin to keep him. He became Batman 24/7. And that's when you introduce Tim Drake. And Tim Drake discovers Batman's identity all on his own, and finds him and says, "I want you to teach me to be Robin," for no other reason than just because he could, because his parents were still alive. and then something happens to his mother eventually during the training period, where his mother dies, but his father's still alive. His father ends up buying the house, because he's probably pretty wealthy too, next to Wayne Manor, and so and it is okay with Tim going over and helping Bruce with yard work or whatever. I don't know what the story was. Maybe
doing yard work at 3 a.m. What are you doing over there?
Yeah, really.
I guess maybe it was more along the lines of, he was a single dad, he had to work, So when he was working, he needed somebody to watch his son, because I think he was an archaeologist or something, so he was traveling all over the world, and he wasn't going to take Tim with him. So he said, you need to have a regular life, so you go to Gotham High School, and then you can stay with Mr. Wayne, or you can stay in your own house. You can stay in our house, and if you have a problem, go see Mr. Wayne, whatever. And then
How old was he? The whole thing is just weird.
I want to say maybe 15, maybe.
I don't remember. I need to check that, to be honest.
You know, the whole Robin thing just bothers me. I mean, I said it before. You know, if you had one that was blown up and tortured by the Joker, why would you bring another one into that?
Well, Bruce didn't want another Robin after that, because Alfred tried to tell him over and over, why don't you call Dick and have him come back? He's like, no, there's not going to be another Robin. We're not doing this again. I'm not putting anybody else at risk that way ever again.
But Tim was just defiant enough that he said, I don't care what you say. You need a Robin, because look, he is your center, because without him, you're going on this aimless thing. You're going to end up getting yourself hurt or killed yourself, and you're doing too much good that, you know, you need to have a Robin to do that. But and here's where, and this is where the writing got really good, because that's around the time when Chuck Dixon and Alan Grant came on, is when Tim Drake was introduced. I think Marv Wolfman might have been the one who introduced him. I'm not 100% certain about that. In Batman Year 3, I'm not exactly sure about that. But I remember Pat Broderick was the artist, but I don't remember who wrote that. And then they brought in Alan Grant and Chuck Dixon. And Batman, after he's decided that, okay, we're going to do this, we're going to make you Robin, but you know what? Jason didn't listen to me. He did not obey me. You will obey me. You will listen to what I tell you to do. You will do what I tell you to do. And if you do not, I'm going to kick your ass out of here. You're not going to be Robin anymore. And so he decided he's going to take his time. He's going to train him much better than he did Jason. He's going to actually send him to other people. He actually going to sort of made him sort of follow his path when he was trained to be Batman. Not quite in the insanity, but I think Bruce was able to contact Lady Shiva, I think.
Yeah, I would argue he might have actually had better training than Dick had.
Yeah, he did. I would agree with that. So and that was just because Batman didn't want that to happen to Tim, what happened to Jason. And Tim was the good soldier. Tim was the one that obeyed Batman, listened to what he said, and that's what made Tim a great Robin. And I figure we may as well, before we get on with the story, may as well talk about the Robin since we're doing it anyway. Tim Drake, pre-52 is my Robin. I like Dick. I like Dick. I like Dick Grayson! I like Dick Grayson!
You see, now, if we had a sound engineer or a producer, I would be like, mark that part on the tape right there. That's going to be a sound bite.
Don't get me wrong, I like Dick Grayson, Richard Grayson, I like him. But pre-52, Tim Drake is my Robin, and the reason why is because of that, because Batman took his time in training him, because basically Batman said, you're going to learn how to do everything before you become Robin, because that was what happened to Jason. Jason didn't listen, didn't learn, he thought he could do everything on his own, and he was wrong, and he died, and I'm not going to do that again. So he did that. He did that instead, and so Robin went and he did his training. He was a good soldier. He learned how to do everything, and I always remember this. He had 3 miniseries that led up to his regular series, and they were written by Chuck Dixon. And I remember this distinctly because I met the artist. His name was Tom Lyle. Was the artist. He was a local guy from Maryland who had been at a bunch of little, minor conventions that they go to. There was a monthly convention thing that we did up here in Maryland, and he was usually the guest there. So I got to see him a lot and talk to him. He actually became the artist on the 3 Robin miniseries, and basically followed his training in the first 2 and showed that he had the same keen intellect that Batman did, the same the same mind, the same detective prowess that Bruce had. Maybe not as acute, but still was very, very smart and very aware of things. And then his athleticism, it took a little while for him to get athletic, but it made him more realistic, and he trained himself up, and he did what he was supposed to, so he became more athletic. So then in the final miniseries is the final task where he has to take on the Joker by himself. Now it wasn't planned that way. Batman didn't want him to do that, but it turned out the way the storyline worked out that Tim Drake had to take on the Joker by himself, and he beat the Joker definitively. He beat him really good. He used his brains. He out crazied and outthought the Joker. He could not outthink, but he was able to outwit the Joker, which made him the best Robin. And then that led to his own series, which was fantastic, by the way. Once again, Chuck Dixon wrote it. Tom Grummett was the artist, and
gorgeous art. It's fantastic.
Yeah, absolutely gorgeous art. And he did that. I mean, they introduced his own his own supporting cast. Batman made appearances every once in a while. Nightwing made appearances every once in a while. Some of the villains made their appearances, but he made his own villains. And he met new friends. He met people like Stephanie Brown, who became the Spoiler, and they became more than friends. He also had, he was living the life of a regular high school, and you got to see him there and stuff like that. So, and then gradually, he was going to that arc where he probably would have made a better Batman than Dick Grayson would have. The only problem was Dick was a lot older and was the next one in line to be Batman. And to be honest, I love Dick Grayson as Batman. He's been Batman twice in the pre-52 times, and he did a great job covering for Bruce in those 2 times. So he would be a really good Batman to take over. But pre-52, I thought Tim Drake was a fantastic Robin. He's my Robin. And then when they decided to change him, and they introduced Damian, and they changed him to Red Robin, it sort of lost a little bit for me. And then Tim Drake became I'm going to say it, the monstrosity he is now in the New 52. I do not like the Tim Drake in the New 52 at all, which is unfortunate. Now, so I like Tim's my Robin. Dick Grayson is my second Robin. And then, believe it or not, Damian, who is Batman's son, who was the most recent Robin, was my third favorite. And at the time, Grant Morrison was the guy who basically created him and brought him into the mythos. And to me, it was Peter Tomasi who basically built the character as it is. Grant Morrison used Damian in a specific way. He wanted Damian to be a specific way, and he was key for a specific reason in the story he wanted to tell. Peter Tomasi was the one that came in on Batman and Robin and made him into the Damian that was likable. Whereas the way Grant Morrison was writing him was almost like Jim Starlin writing Jason Todd. It was almost like you wanted him to die because he was a petulant little brat who was kind of annoying, whereas Peter Tomasi still kept that character because that's what Damian's character is, but you got to look a little deeper into Damian and discover that he did respect his father, that he respected Alfred, that he really, really respected Nightwing because Dick Grayson was Batman during a time where Damian was his Robin. So the two of them worked well together and worked hard together, and he learned a lot. I think he learned probably more from Dick Grayson than he did from Bruce. And it was kind of weird for Bruce because all of a sudden, hey, you have a 12-year-old boy who's your son coming in there who wasn't trained to be an assassin and doing against everything that you believe in, and you've never had any real time to be like a dad because he was always Batman and Robin. He was never really a dad to Dick Grayson, with the exception of Devin Grayson writing Gotham Knights. I don't know if you guys ever heard of that comic. Gotham Knights came out in the 90s. No. Devin Grayson is one of the female writers who wrote Batman and wrote the hell out of him, did a great job. And she focused more on like Batman's family. Batman was in it, but it was more along the lines of Batman's family. And yes, Nightwing had his own series, but she had a specific story she wanted to tell. And I'm never going to forget this. The story that she wanted to tell was having Bruce officially adopt Dick as his son and heir. Because up to that point, he was only his ward, and not his real son. And they went through this like 6-issue story arc, whatever, that just solidified Dick and Bruce's relationship as father and son. And Devin just wrote a fantastic thing. So the way I don't know if I don't know if that really exists anymore in the new 52, because in the most recent Nightwing, the two of them had a down out, beat the shit out of each other fight in the Batcave. So I guess maybe fathers and sons do that, but
Yeah.
not so much, I guess.
Yeah, well, not quite like that. Most fathers and sons aren't world-class martial artist, acrobat, vigilantes. So, you know.
So and then so Damian, I think Damian made his mark with Peter Tomasi and Batman and Robin. You got to see the kid that he was. Peter Tomasi was able to bring the kid out in Damian. He is, after all, a 12-year-old. Mm-hmm. And Tomasi introduced a version of Ace the Bat Hound, but not put the mask on like that. It was just a dog because Bruce said, you know what? You need a dog. Boys have dogs. Here's a dog for you. And at the time, Damian was like, I don't want this damn dog, but then it became like his friend and did exactly what he was supposed to. He was a loyal dog, and they had that. And then there was also Grant Morrison brought in the Bat Cow, which was something that came from Tiny Titans, which was it's a fantastic series. But the Bat Cow, so they sort of did that. So it made Damian look more like a 12-year-old, and Pierre Tomasi wrote him as more of a 12-year-old, and you got to see those different shades of Damian, and that's why I like him after Dick Grayson, because at first when I saw him as a guy, he's just another Jason Todd, but when Pierre Tomasi started writing him, he brought out this character that made you, feel sorry for him a little bit, but also still made you want to say, I want to slap that freaking kid. I want to choke him. But Tomasi was able to weigh that out, whereas Morrison did that a little bit, but he focused more on the petulant side than the character side. So, and then of course he kills him off because that was the whole point. He was going to have Damian get killed anyway. It was always down the line. And that really sucks for Peter Tomasi because he was writing a book called Batman and Robin. And now there's no Robin.
Yeah.
He wrote probably, and Peter Tomasi probably wrote, with the exception of Greg Capullo, Scott Snyder wrote a really good Requiem for Robin issue, but Peter Tomasi had to focus on Bruce's reaction to the death of his son and did a really nice 6-issue story arc, and one of the best was a completely silent issue that took place right after his death with no word balloons, and you can just see Batman's just distraught, being so distraught, and the way Patrick Gleason, the artist, brought it out in him, and Tomasi wrote it as, just this amazing, heart-wrenching story. It made you feel so bad for it. It is probably one of my favorite Batman stories of all time, and there's no words in it at all. It is just perfectly phenomenal. It was Batman and Robin number 18, 19, something like that. It is a really good one. So what do? I like what Pierre Tomasi decided to do. What he then decided to do was he is basically making Brave and the Bold again, which was back in the 60s and 70s was Batman's team-up book, but keeping the same general story arc going on. So every issue would have a different person in the title. So it would be Batman and Nightwing, Batman and Batgirl, Batman and Two-Face, Batman and Aquaman, Batman and Wonder Woman, But the story is going from the point of Damian's death. Right now they're doing the search for Robin because Ra's al Ghul has captured Talia's body, who died in the final battle with Bruce, and Damian's body, and is trying to bring them back to life, and Batman is trying to get them to reinter them because don't bring them back because they're going to be worse than they are.
Yeah.
So, so those, and then of course Jason Todd's at the bottom because I didn't like Jason Todd. The Red Hood is a good idea, but I just don't like his character. And now I've talked enough. Now you guys, you tell me your top Robins. Whoever wants to go first. MJ, you want to go first?
Oh, let's see. I like Nightwing better than I did Robin, but I'd have to say as far as the Robins go, it would be Tim Drake as well. Would be my favorite Robin. Even though I like, their older characters, I do like Nightwing better, but I'd say as far as the Robins go, it would have to be Tim Drake. I noticed that we didn't really mention Stephanie Brown. I mean, how long was she Robin? Maybe a hot minute?
Yeah, something like that, yeah.
But I mean, she was in there, and, I know that she became spoiler, she was dead, what did not happen. I actually thought she made a really interesting Robin. I really did. I think that if they could have explored that a little further, I think that would have been a really, really good storyline. Because, going back to Frank Miller's The Dark Knight, I really did like the female Robin that he had. I think it was Charlie, and you know, Batman was Carrie. Yes, I really liked that character. You know, I mean, she was different, and Batman was older, and I liked the fact that he kept threatening to fire her. Like, if you don't do what I say, I'm going to fire you, and you won't be Robin anymore. And you know, she took that seriously. And for whatever reason, I really liked her as Robin. So I don't know if you can actually count that or not, but you know.
I'm sorry. Yeah, I probably should have, because I liked Carrie Kelly as Robin also, and actually that's one of the things that if you haven't been reading Batman and Robin, Tomasi has actually reintroduced Carrie Kelly into modern day. But she's not Robin yet. But she was a girl who was about Damien's, a little bit older than Damien, who we learned another side of Damien, that he wanted to take acting lessons. For whatever reason, I guess because he was always around Alfred, and Alfred's telling him, you know, and you know, maybe it's something, you know, something fascinating. You can be a wholly, completely different character than you are, and we discovered that Carrie Kelly, who is an actress, like in high school or something like that, was tutoring him on how to be an actor. And in this silent issue, I was talking about, Bruce is looking through Damien's room, and he sees a list. And you don't know it's Carrie Kelly. She appears the next issue, I think. But in that issue, you see a list of movies with a little note that says you should check these out, and you know, and then just had all these, like, you know, 80s and 70s movies. Look, Godfather was up there, I think, and some other stuff as well. And there was even little jokes like not Costner, you know. So, and then at the bottom you couldn't see, it was they had it shaded so you couldn't see who had signed it, and it turned out it was Carrie Kelly. Yes, I liked her as Robin because the female Robin is excellent. But to me, Dark Knight Returns is more of a Elseworld story and not really in a contemporary. I mean, it could possibly still be down the line, but at this point, I consider it more of an alternate reality standalone.
And that's how I look at it. That's why I don't really count Carrie as a Robin. But if so, she and Tim would definitely be my favorites. You know, with Jason being at the very bottom down there, I was like, God, please don't let him come back. So,
And then Stephanie, the reason why I didn't bring her in is because she was horribly mistreated. And I like Bill Willingham, but he did not want to write her as Robin. It was a thing to get, you know, get readers to come in. Tim Drake said, I quit, I don't want to be Robin anymore, and Stephanie just leapt to the chance, and she was, like, for 2 issues she was Robin, and then they went into this story arc, which was absolute BS. It was, like, called Mob Wars or something like that, where Stephanie knew that Batman didn't like her, and she felt if she could do something to help him, he would like her better. So she goes, does some research on his computer, finds like one of his, you know, plans that he has, and puts into motion without reading it all the way through. And it turns out creating a gang war. And then she gets captured by the Black Mask, and she gets tortured to death. Which I'm going to say right now, I despise torture. Torture is one of the things I absolutely hate most of all. And the Black Mask is one of my least favorite villains. He's very scary, he's very threatening, but his modus operandi is he tortures, and that's what he does.
Very sadistic.
He's very sadistic. And so they didn't torture her to death, but torture her enough that she was close to death. And then Batman had a ally in that woman who runs the hospital. And she came to him and said, I'm sorry, Stephanie's dead. You know, I wasn't going to. And this was another thing, because her character, she's a freaking doctor, and she said, I'm not going to fix her because I want to teach you a lesson for taking these kids under your wing and putting them into danger. So Batman banishes her from Gotham. First of all, I have a lot of issues with that. One, she's a freaking doctor. It doesn't matter.
You don't teach a lesson like that.
You don't teach a lesson like that. You help the person. Now, if she died of her injuries, there's nothing you do about it. But if you did everything you could in your power to save her, there's nothing that you can do. But to go boldly, go to Batman and say, I did nothing, I wanted to let her die to teach you a lesson, that's total BS. So then he banishes her, and then, you know, fast forward about a year or two, in an issue of Robin, we go back to that scene where she's in the desert in the Middle East, something like that. And look, Stephanie Brown is still alive. Basically, she said that because she wanted to hurt Bruce and teach him a lesson, but she actually did save Stephanie and needed her to recover, but she had to keep up. And that's BS also. That's a terrible story as well. And then but good came out of it though. Then when they brought her back, Stephanie, into Batman proper, they gave her the best possible role, which was they made her Batgirl and gave her her own series, and that was, you got a good writer, and I forget what his name is, Q something, Scott Q something, whatever. He did a fantastic job of writing Batgirl. It was amazing. It was amazing, and then New 52 happens. There's no Stephanie Brown, and everyone's in uproar. Barbara Gordon is Batgirl again. She's no longer crippled, which I had issues with, but I'm starting to be okay with him now because Gail Simone is writing the hell out of that book, and I've always liked Barbara also, and then eventually, thankfully, Batman Eternal comes around, which is the weekly Batman series that's running now. And look who's back! Stephanie's back! A spoiler! Yay! And she's going to play a major role in it, and stuff like that. So, and yeah, Michael Feisen, that's what I was basically saying. Yes, she was tortured to death, and the doctor didn't help her, and then they retconned it, because they wanted to bring her back because that's just not the way. And then that's because Willingham didn't want to write either the doctor character or Stephanie Brown. And then also, Michael's also saying that was his problem with Tim Drake. He thought Tim Drake was pushed into DC too fast and unrealistic for him. I can see that also. He popped up in Batman Year 3, and then all of a sudden he's someone you never heard of before, and there he is. And then Michael also says, in this modern day, the New 52, Robin is not necessary, no sidekicks needed, which is true because that's where one of my issues with the New 52 is the way they handle the Robin thing. It's canon that 5 years has passed when the new book started, and in that time he had 4 Robins, one of which was his 12-year-old son Damian, which. How does that work?
How do you fit the 12 years into that 5-year window? That's impressive.
And that's where I said.
When's the next crisis?
It might be coming up actually because the Forever Evil storyline was teasing something, the Anti-Monitor's return and stuff like that.
The Red Skies and everything are back.
They're teasing that, but. Then what they do Dick was Robin for a year. Jason Todd was Robin for about a year. He died, came back to life. Now he's the Red Hood. Tim Drake was not Robin. He basically was. He's a douchebag now who decided he didn't want to be Robin, but decided to help him in any other way. And now he's Red Robin. And I just remember I read an issue of him in the New Titans where he's macking on 2 girls at the same time. Tim Drake would never do that. I'm sorry. He wouldn't. And then there's Damian. In 5 years. 3 Robins and a Tim Drake. Yeah, exactly.
I mean, I agree with everything you said, except for the fact that, I think that doctor should have taught him a lesson to stay away from those kids. So, she had the right idea.
Yeah, there is, but not to take
care of them. Not that way.
Not that way, but I just think that somebody needs to say, hey, you know what? Leave them alone. I think that somewhere in Gotham there's an orphanage where all the kids run when Alfred pulls up to the door. They hide and they're like, "No, we don't want to be adopted by that man," because they never come back again.
Little Timmy didn't come back when he went.
No, they're all hiding and everything from Alfred.
So, DH, we were talking about Robin. What's your favorite Robin?
For me, Tim Drake is my Robin. It's all pre-New 52.
Right.
He established himself as being the heir apparent to Batman once he's finally old enough to take it over. When Bruce is ready to stop, at that point, he'll be old enough to go ahead and take over as Batman. And no less than Ra's al Ghul has already, more or less shown that he respects him enough to call him detective.
Yeah.
Which that's significant.
High praise right there. So.
That's huge. That's huge, right? You know, when you have the respect of Ra's al Ghul in that way, for him to call you detective the same as he does for Bruce, that's definitely high praise. And everything Tim had done, at least pre-New 52, showed that he definitely has grown into the role, and has grown, you know, to be better than Dick was in the role even. I love Nightwing, but, you know, just like you guys were saying, yeah, I think he's better as Nightwing than he ever was as Robin.
Yes.
And I remember when he made the transition from Robin to Nightwing, and that was an awkward period, because he was still with the Titans and he was still Robin for a while there, and then eventually, you know, because he had this huge falling out with Bruce. But yeah, Tim is definitely got a notch up on Dick as Robin. As far as Jason Todd goes, he should still be dead. Let's just, you know,
leave it at that. Yeah.
We'll just, you know, the retcon punch, just that was one of the things that made me just take another step back from DC. I just couldn't deal with any more of that. That's, you know, Jason Todd is back now. Oh, really?
Yeah.
Anything but Jason Todd. Come on, guys. You know?
No,
where's that 1-900 number when you need it?
Let me find the number. I'll call as many times as you want. Honest. You know?
Or can you just tell the evil Superboy Prime, hit the wall again, make him die again this time, you know, retcon punch it again and see what happens next.
There you go. There you go.
I do understand, though, and I understand why the Red Hood is there, and it's an interesting theory, and I just wish maybe it was somebody else. Now, what the theory is the Red Hood is is Jason Todd, who was Robin at one time, trained by Batman, and trained, Batman is the top of the top. He taught how to be athletic, be a detective, be all this stuff. You learn how to do all this stuff, and you don't kill. Jason Todd likes to kill. And that's where he is different than Bruce. He believes that the only way to stop the bad guys, to stop the villains, is to kill them, which is very kind of a Punisher belief system to have. Is the only way to stop the bad guys is to kill them. That way, and you can make a case. I mean, look, if you would have killed the Joker, all the shit that he does and all the people that he hurts and he kills would not be dead. They would not be hurt. They would not be killed. They would not be dead. All the pain and suffering that the villains who escape from Arkham come back in and then cause would not be an issue anymore because they're dead.
Right.
But there is no guarantee that there's not going to be some other psychopath who's either going to take up the mantle or have a whole different idea of how to take it. So in the end, it's going to be the same thing. It's going to be a continuing cycle. And that's the thing. And not to throw Harry Potter in here, but now I had to throw Harry Potter into a Batman conversation. But in the Horcruxes that Voldemort does, in order to create a Horcrux, which is a piece of your soul being stored away so that if you die, you can grab it and get it back into your system, you pretty much have to kill somebody to do that. And that's basically what J.K. Rowling was saying, is that by killing somebody, you lose a part of your soul. And that's why the superheroes don't kill people, because they want to save lives. And yes, killing bad guys, as we said, might help save more lives, but again, it might not. Yeah. And Batman's full belief is that he does not kill ever because he saw his parents get killed, and he doesn't want to. He doesn't want to have anyone else suffer through that or deal with that sort of situation again, because these people, even though they might be bad guys, they might have family and stuff like that as well. And they don't want, and it takes a piece of your soul away. Jason Todd doesn't care. He wants to clean up Gotham City, and he thinks the only way to do it is to kill people, and that is why he and Batman are at each other's faces. But occasionally, in the New 52 especially, he's come in, he's helped out, and I'll even say it, during the whole death of the family storyline that was in the New 52, I liked a couple issues that were focused on Jason Todd. They gave his character, I think Scott Lobdell wrote them, he made his character seem almost someone you should maybe forgive and say, okay, maybe all right, I pushed my hatred aside of him. But then they bring back the dickish douchebag again, and there's nothing you can do. I like the theory of someone who is trained by Batman going against what Batman believes and knocking heads with him. I think it's an interesting theory, and I know why they did it with Jason Todd, because he was the one Robin that failed. So
wasn't quite good enough, and ended up tortured and blown up.
That tends to leave a mark on somebody.
Yeah, deep one. See, now I think that they should take Jason, and I think that he should go out and maybe, if that's how he wants to be, have him join like the League of Assassins or something like that, and then have him realize that what, this is what this really leads to. This is maybe he doesn't want to become that, and that'll help him to see that what, Bruce wasn't so bad after all. So let me kind of work back a little bit. But if they want him to be like, then let him go. I say put him in the League. Let him have at it, and then come to his own conclusions and say, okay, all right, I'm not quite there yet. So.
Excellent. Okay, so we've got our Robin stories down. Let's see. We talked a little bit about creative teams, but why don't we talk about some of the Batman comic stories that we like? Now, DH, I know you said you had some you wanted to talk about. Why don't you start us off then?
Well, for me, there's 5 that stand out to me as really good, and they're not all. One of them, or 2 of them actually, aren't even in continuity. First, of course, being Dark Knight Returns. Mm-hmm. That's number 5 on my list. It's very gritty, very dark. I think that and Batman Year One were the 2 best examples of Frank Miller writing Batman. With Dark Knight Returns, you can see where he's this old, grizzled veteran who's been there and done that and seen everything. And he just simply, has the I don't care attitude. I'm going to go ahead and just take care of this now. You can almost picture like a Clint Eastwood playing that. Yes. If they had done that. So that was very big in giving a very different, very dark look for Batman, where things could go in the future, like we were talking about. Another one I really liked was by John Byrne, the Batman Captain America crossover. That was set in World War II. You had the Joker, you had the Red Skull, you have Batman and Robin, Captain America and Bucky, and it's just. It was brilliant. It was just brilliant the way it was done. I mean, you look at the premise and you think, oh, well, how are they going to go ahead and do that? But they managed to go ahead and do it and have it actually make sense, as much as it could at least. And that's one of my favorite stories because it showed the differences between the war that Cap was fighting over in Europe as opposed to what Batman would have been doing at the same time here in the States still. Another one for me is Nightfall, which is, of course, Break the Bat. The whole lead up to that was so much better than they showed in Dark Knight Rises. You have the whole thing where literally they go ahead and they just break all the criminals out of prison, and he just has to go through this entire gauntlet of one after another of his entire rogues gallery, just about.
And it was a good idea of Bane's to wear him down so that Bane can come and totally destroy him after being worn down after that.
Right.
Mm-hmm. And the thing is, that showed that Bane actually was a smart guy as opposed to just some big musclehead, which is how he was depicted a lot of times after that, unfortunately. It was like they forgot he was supposed to be a guy who was just as smart as Batman.
You hear that, Schumacher?
We don't speak that name, remember?
I'll tell you what, though. I agree with that, but a really excellent version of Bane was in The Secret Six. I don't know if you guys read The Secret Six, written by Gail Simone. It was a team of third-tier villains who worked, but Gail Simone did a fantastic job running it. She brought in Bane near the end of her run and made him like that character again, which was great. Next up for you, DH.
Kingdom Come.
Okay.
The alt future story that was written by Mark Waid, painted by Alex Ross. It showed Bruce was at his calculating, paranoid, methodical best. Even after his body had long since failed him and he couldn't actually go out there on his own rooftop to rooftop every night. He pretty much had given up on the secret identity by that point, but he had pretty much, and it established pretty fairly well that Bruce Wayne is the mask for Batman. Mm-hmm. It's not the other way around. Yeah, he simply was full-time Batman at that point. Yeah. It didn't necessarily need to go ahead and worry about about rebuilding the house once everybody showed up and tore down the building. And I just thought that was brilliant the way they played him, pretty much showing the natural extension of where things would go with that. Mm-hmm. But it all comes back to Batman Year One for me.
Yeah.
That's the definitive story for me. That shows everything about where he comes from, what he thinks, what motivates him, what drives him. It's all there.
Mm-hmm.
MJ, which ones do you have any favorites off the top of your head?
Yeah, I'd say not any particular order, but Dark Knight Returns is probably right up there for me. That's probably my favorite. To me, that's my definitive one. I still remember the first time I read it, the second, the third time I read it, and I just kept getting deeper and deeper into it, and it's just, it was so the running inner dialogue that was captured by Frank Miller was just, amazing to me. And it's just like, the fact that, hey, here he is, he's pushing however old he is, he's still driven, and, he likes getting out there and cracking these bones with people, and I'm just like, but then he's like, oh, my back hurts. the Robin, the whole thing with, the other heroes that showed up that were still there, I don't know, I love that story, and I keep going back to that. Some of the other ones, I liked Hush. But part of that was the Jim Lee artwork. I love Jim Lee's artwork. So I really like that. And then there was a crossover with Dark Horse, one of my all-time favorite characters, Grendel. That one was a two-parter, or I guess there were like two separate ones, maybe self-contained. But I don't know. I really, really loved that one too. I always liked Grendel, and to me, it was just a natural meeting of the minds when the two of them got together, and the respect that they had for each other by the end of it. That to me, that's one of my all-time favorites as well.
Okay.
That's good stuff.
Yeah, there's some good stuff in there. I think I'm going to chime in and say, yeah, Dark Knight Returns is up there for me as well. I really enjoyed that a lot. Year One and Year Two together, they are completely different, but they're both important to his story. And I like that. Year Three was okay, but it just seemed like that they were jumping onto the coattails of 1 and 2. And it did introduce Tim Drake, but that was about it. I mean, it focused on Nightwing, Dick becoming Robin, and then Tim was in there. And I always remember I was working at a comic book store at that time. In the first issue, you have this kid named Tim Drake who was at the circus also. I think maybe even the same day that Dick's parents died. And they focused on, you got his picture taken with Dick and all this stuff also. And the guy I was working with was like, you know what? I bet you that guy's going to be the new Robin, and this is going to be a big issue. So it turned out to be true, because after Year 3, that's when Tim Drake came into the being. And we talked about this earlier. Son of the Demon is another good one. Mike Barr, Jerry Bingham. I talked about that last show. That was the one where Batman actually teams up with Ra's al Ghul to save the world. He actually agrees with one of the plans that Ra's has, and ends up getting closer to Talia, and she ends up getting pregnant. And Batman is just seeing the happiness, seeing a happy Batman is an interesting variation of what you're used to. And then, of course, the shit hits the fan, and everything goes to hell in a handbasket. Talia claims she loses the kid. Ross and Batman have a parting of the ways, and Batman goes back dejected to Gotham City. But we find out later on that Talia puts up their child for adoption. Now, that storyline is what Grant Morrison decided to glean on with his storyline with Damian. Mm-hmm. The only difference was Talia didn't give up the baby. She kept the baby and trained him how to be the assassin. So they made that slight little retcon, but in the book itself, Son of the Demon, she had put him up for adoption, the baby that the two of them had together. And I always thought that would have been a very interesting story to come back to, that this kid eventually finds out that he's not really his adopted family's, kid, that he's actually the son of Bruce Wayne and Talia, and then is able to discover Bruce Wayne's Batman, whatever. I think that would have been a very interesting story to tell, but they ended up not doing that, and then Grant Morrison did what he wanted to and created a story that was pretty good too, as well. And then let's see what else is on there. Killing Joke was nice to look at. Alan Moore's okay. Alan Moore's hit or miss for me. I thought the story was a little too vicious for my taste, but it was important. I mean, they paralyzed Barbara Gordon, and once again, torture comes into the hand where they're psychologically torturing James Gordon, and there's the rumors that have been flying lately that the Joker actually raped Barbara Gordon. I don't think that's the case. I think he was just messing with her head. But the artwork by Brian Bolland was just fantastic. The storyline itself was okay. A lot of people consider it to be a important Batman story. It was okay, and I like it mostly for the artwork, but it's a good one. Hush has its moments. The one Batman story that got me back into Batman after a long disappearance was No Man's Land, which they tried to do an aspect of for the movie Dark Knight Rises. But I had to read what led to that. There was two other storylines that led to it: Contagion, Cataclysm, and No Man's Land. And what was interesting is that No Man's Land came about due to something that was not a supervillain related. It was related by the Earth. An earthquake that hit Gotham City wasn't done by a villain in any way. It was just an simple earthquake that rocked Gotham, destroyed it, and they just did not have the funds to rebuild. And so Bruce Wayne had to go to Congress to try to get money to talk to them, but they are just like, you know what, Gotham is a cesspool with all these horrible villains and Batman and stuff like that. Let's just shut it down. So they blow up the bridges and they make them survive on their own. And the No Man's Land story took place for a full year, and it's probably one of the best stories out there because there's no heroes and villains, because the heroes and villains actually are working together. The simple goal of surviving in a no man's land. And yeah, there are heroes and villains, there are fights, and the Joker plays a big part of it near the end. But it was one of my favorite storylines was the No Man's Land one, a full year long. It got me back into comics, the Batman comics particularly. So there's that one. I got two more, and then a couple. Oh, I got a bunch more actually.
The big two.
Yeah.
Hush had its moments. I like the fact that Jeff Loeb brought all of Bruce's villains back, and Jim Lee's artwork was gorgeous. But there's just some issues I have with some of the storyline, which we won't get into right now. Scott Snyder's first story arc in the New 52, The Court of Owls, was a pretty good storyline with Greg Capullo artwork, where Batman discovers a secret society has been controlling Gotham for centuries, and he never heard about it. They've been so good that they've been hiding him out. The only thing I didn't like was the finale of it, which is hinting at the fact that Bruce Wayne actually has a brother. And I'm not a big fan of that. I hope it's just a mind fuck for him, and that does not turn out to be an actual Bruce Wayne brother, because I just think that would, I don't know, it wouldn't work. It wouldn't work for me. But Capullo did good artwork, and this is one of the ones where Batman actually loses it a little bit and almost loses the whole thing, but is able to push through and get his sanity back, and it's a pretty good storyline. And then I'll just get into some of the Elseworlds, and then I'll get my favorite one. The Elseworlds, my favorite Elseworlds is Gotham by Gaslight, which was the very first Elseworld.
First one, yeah.
Yeah, which was drawn by Mike Mignola, and it's basically Batman taking on Jack the Ripper, which is fantastic. In Darkest Night, where Bruce gets the Green Lantern ring instead of Hal Jordan. That's a good one also. The Bloodstorm trilogy, written by Doug Munch and drawn by Kelly Jones, which was What If Batman Became a Vampire. It was a very creepy, horror-esque one. It's a good one. And John Byrne, we talked about this, I think, last time, Generations, and Superman.
Yes.
Batman and Superman. World's Finest, when Batman and Superman get together, there's always a good story, because the two of them are really good playing off each other, and I like that. The New 52, not so much, but the old pre-New 52, they've actually had some really, really good World's Finest stories. Generations is one of those, even though it takes place in an alternate dimension, or alternate reality, Elseworlds. And then back in contemporary DC, the World's Finest story by Steve Rude, where Batman and Superman team up when the Joker decides to invade Metropolis and Lex Luthor invades Gotham. Lex Luthor and the Joker meet up. They decide the only way to beat their prospective adversaries is to switch places, so that Lex Luthor has to take on Batman and Superman has to take on the Joker. But of course, Batman and Superman turn the tables on that by having Superman go to Gotham and Batman go to Metropolis, which in itself is just a really good idea. Just to see Batman in the bright future, city of the future, with not a lot of dark shadows, not a lot of creepy people, just just futuristic
smiling.
He's stuck with the shiny, happy people. Yeah.
Yeah, really.
And then Superman, this bastion of light, comes to the dark of Gotham City. Is like, what the hell is Batman doing here? This is horrible. But my favorite Batman story of all time, and will always go down, is Long Halloween.
That's a good one. Yeah.
Jeff Loeb, Tim Sale. I even like the sequel, Dark Victory. I think that's excellent also, but Long Halloween is still my absolute favorite. I'm a big holiday geek. I love holidays, stuff like that. And the fact that it's a 13-issue miniseries that hits every major holiday through the year. So every month, January is New Year's Day, Valentine's Day, Easter, or St. Patrick's Day, Easter, Memorial Day, first day of summer, stuff like that. Just all kinds of, 4th of July, and you have the holiday serial killer. The serial killer goes around and kills people on those holidays, leaving behind a little figurine of the holiday. It's an excellent story. It's an excellent story. I enjoyed it immensely, and Dark Victory was the sequel, which used the Hangman instead of him being a holiday one. It's a Hangman. There's a Hangman in every death scene now, and Batman has to figure out what the Hangman is. So those two, in my eyes, are the best Batman stories out there.
I'll tell you what, if the Long Halloween did not drive people away from Gotham, I don't know what would. I can just see them now. Can I just eat a hamburger in peace? It's 4th of July. I just want to enjoy a hamburger. No.
And then another good series that a lot of people might have missed out was Gotham Central. That's not really a Batman story so much as it was basically homicide or Law and Order, but in Gotham. And it was written by Ed Brubaker and it's killing me. Ed Brubaker and Greg Rucka. Two really good crime type writers that focuses on the Gotham Police Department and focuses on their characters. That was an excellent series. The two of them alternated story arcs, and then they would sometimes work together on story arcs, and Batman was more in the background where you focus more on the characters. So Gotham Central is another good one to look at. All right, so I think we've hit all that stuff. I think we'll just end up with what our let's make sure we're not missing anything. What we believe is to be. We've talked a lot about Batman's comics, the creative teams, the stories we like. But what is in your eyes, the definitive Batman artist? Now, DH, I know you have yours already, so I'm going to go to you first.
For me, it's tough to pick one because there's three that come to mind immediately for me. Of course, the most recent one would be Jim Lee, whose work redefined everything as soon as he took over. Jim Lee's artwork has always been just brilliant, though. I mean, I'll go ahead and look at anything that he draws. Yeah, exactly. If he draws it, I'll pick it up. It's one of those things where it's an instant thing where I'll have to at least take a look and see what he's doing because the artwork is always just gorgeous. Throughout the 80s, Jim Aparo did so much Batman stuff. He really defined the look of Batman for so many years there. I think he's one of the artists. But before that, I'd have to say Neil Adams back in the 70s. Really just brought everything back to a very organic creature of shadow again. And took it away from the bright lights we had in the 50s and 60s and just completely established what we have today.
Sounds good. MJ, do you have a definitive artist for Batman?
I do, and again, I'm going to agree. I think that Jim Lee, does an amazing job. Right now, he is like my tops. But I say if I had to go with a favorite, it's going to be, Frank Miller, just because I link it to his Dark Knight, and which is, for me, my favorite Batman storyline. And so I'll always see Frank Miller's artwork as something that was integral to the story, and it just kind of hooked me. So I'm going to go with Frank Miller.
Okay, that's a good one. Mine is DH mentioned him is Jim Aparo. Jim Aparo to me is the definitive Batman artist. Jim Lee, yes, he has his moments, and Frank Miller, yes, I can see that as well. But to me, Jim Aparo, the way he drew Batman, is the definitive version for me. It's the way the cowl is, the way the cape is, the way the symbol is. It is exactly what, whenever I picture Batman, it's Jim Aparo's artwork. And the reason why is because it is so clean. It's not this abstract. I mean, there's nothing wrong with having abstract art in comics. It sometimes works in some comics. Batman, not so much, really. I mean, you have your issues. One of Grant Morrison's first stories he ever wrote was Arkham Asylum graphic novel, where Dave McKean did the artwork, and it just, to me, I lost it a little bit because David McKean is a great artist, but he's also more of an abstract painterly artist. And yeah, his version of the Joker was horrifying, and of all of Arkham's people, but there was just something about it I was not a big fan of, because it wasn't clean. It wasn't, it just was all over the place, because but that's the way it was supposed to be. That's the way Dave McKean is.
Right.
So that's cool. But Aparo's artwork is just, when you think Batman, that's the first person that jumps to my head is Aparo, just because of his clean lines. Norm Breyfogle is another good one, but his thing is he always seems to be drawing Batman as if he's moving. So it's a lot of angles, a lot of like that, where you don't see a lot of features on his face, stuff like that, detail, stuff like that. So like that. Kelly Jones's version was too horrific for me, though I thought Doug Munch as the writer, their run was pretty good, but it was just too. It was taking the Batman aspect and making it more of a horror aspect. Scott McDaniel's the same as Norm Breyfogle, just his characters are moving all over the place and no real defined stuff. Patrick Gleason's pretty good at it, but he's still got a little bit of an abstract quality to it. Greg Capullo, who's doing the artwork now, is pretty good as well and could be considered up there as being one of the definitive ones. But for me, Jim Aparo is always going to be my Batman artist. So I think we've covered about everything. Is there anything else you guys want to hit on, talk about, discuss?
The only thing I can think of is that anybody who likes Batman today needs to thank Denny O'Neil and Neil Adams, because without them taking over the title at the end of the 60s going into the 70s, it probably would have been canceled after the TV show went off the air, because things really plummeted after that. And
actually, Michael Fiveson agrees with you. He says Neil Adams, he is the one who brought Batman back after the TV series made a camp. So I guess to Michael, his definitive Batman is Neil Adams, which is great, because Neil Adams is fantastic also. So I think, MJ, do you have any last remarks?
I think that the direction it's going in, hopefully they'll keep up the run with it. But when I think about Batman and what I enjoy, it's not just Batman. The whole family. It's the Robins. It's Batwoman. Batgirl is an amazing title for anybody who hasn't picked that up yet. I mean, that's just an amazing one. So I think any of those are just kind of it's his whole family. It's what he's come to stand for. That's what I'm starting to really enjoy. So.
Heather T. Sort of agrees with it. She likes the Birds of Prey, which was more of a Batman connection in the pre-52. Now kind of still is, because Batgirl is in Birds of Prey now too. But Birds of Prey is another good one if you like female characters. There's strong female role models, and Black Canary is a great role model in that, and Batgirl's in it as well, and they've got some other good stuff. So I think Christy Marks is you actually have a female writing it. So I think Christy Marks is writing it now. So you might want to check out Birds of Prey now. But I always remember Birds of Prey with Barbara Gordon as Oracle, Huntress, and Black Canary was one of my favorite books, mostly due to Chuck Dixon and Gail Simone, who were the two main writers. Tony Bedard did some stuff in there as well, which wasn't bad, but to me it's Chuck Dixon and Gail Simone are the ones who really made Birds of Prey the book it is now. And also, yeah, and Heather TL says Guillaume March, an artist for The Dark Knight. Yeah, he's also doing some of the Batman Eternal stuff. Is going to be at the Philly Wizard World, so if you want to go see him, that'll be cool. That's we should talk about real quick now is what's going on in Batman right now. Right now, let's see, they've got the Batman title, which was written by Scott Snyder and drawn by Greg Capullo. They're going through their Year Zero storyline, which I've detailed before that it's okay. It's not a great storyline. It could have been so much better, but it seems like to me they're cramming No Man's Land, Cataclysm, all in at one big storyline, and the creation of the Joker all at the same time in this one big 12-issue story arc. And so it's good. I mean, the artwork is very nice to look at because Greg Capullo is a fantastic artist, and Scott Snyder has his moments with writing. But to me, it's not. It's my second favorite Batman title that's out there now. Actually, it's tied. I'll say it's tied with Batman Eternal. But Batman and whoever, like Peter Tomasi, Patrick Gleason, is my Bat book. I think Peter Tomasi is just killing it on the series. He's doing a fantastic job. Patrick Gleason's artwork is fantastic, and I like this going into like more of a brave and bold aspect where you have a Batman team up, which is good to see how Batman reacts to other people besides the people in his family, which is good. Detective, we'll see. They've got Brian Buccellato or whatever is writing and drawing it right now, and it's trying to get back to the detective thing, but it could be a little bit of overkill. I don't know. And they've already canceled Dark Knight, I think, so that's not out there anymore. And then Batman Eternal is actually really good now, too. If you get a chance, DH, try to pick up the story right now. It is weekly, so you're going to divide every week, but
yeah.
They're building a really good storyline that I think is going to lead to an amazing end. They're building to something really amazing, and I think, and it's got aspects of the supernatural, which is something we haven't seen in Batman in a while. It's got crime drama again with Falcone coming back, and you've got Stephanie Brown making an appearance as well, and we've actually seen a view into Gotham's future. He's going to have some new partners. Catwoman is going to become more of a badass, and Stephanie Brown is going to play a huge role in the storyline, so I'm actually really excited about how Batman Eternal is going to go. So I think you should check that out. We were talking about Dick Grayson. I don't know if you guys know. Nightwing has been canceled, but he is going to be reintroduced in a new series called Grayson, where he's going to play like a super spy. So we'll see how that is. Yeah, Grayson seemed to like that idea.
Yeah, I read about that, and I just kind of shook my head. We'll see where that goes, but I don't have a real good feeling about that one.
Tim Seeley's okay. I like Hack and Slash, and he's doing some work on Batman Eternal, but yeah, we'll have to wait and see. Also, I'm not sure I like the idea of Dick Grayson as a super spy, so we'll see. Catwoman has sort of been aimless a little bit, but I think with her going to become a major factor in the future of Batman, it should be maybe she could take off a little bit more. And then Batwing, which is one of those that you don't really hear much about. Jimmy Palmiotti and Justin Gray are doing a pretty good job on that. I don't really follow it as much as I should. But it's Lucius Fox's son is playing a guy who has Batman like bat wings and flies around and is smart, and he's also like a martial artist and stuff like that. And Batman is okay with him flying around, so that's pretty good. But I mean, you can't go wrong with Jimmy Palmiotti and Justin Gray. They're good writers and they've got some good stuff. But I just haven't been following it that much. So. That's what's going on in modern-day Batman. And then, of course, you said Batgirl is doing phenomenal. Batwoman's also very interesting as well. They're doing some amazing things with the female Bat characters, so that's a great one. So I think we've covered everything with Batman. I'm going to thank you guys for coming back on again for part 2 of this.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me, man. It was great.
Yeah, I'm sure there were other things we could talk about, but I think we hit everything right now that we need to. Thank you, everybody who's out there and been commenting. Especially hi Dante. Dante Reeves says hi Dylan. Says hi Dante. Michael Fiveson and Heather T. Thanks for coming on here and hanging out with us. So if you were watching the show closely, MJ revealed his answer to his question, and I revealed my answer to my question. Now, what the questions are, I will let you know once the show is over. So, my Twitter handle is @Holodill. If you don't have Twitter, well,
We'll make one.
yeah.
Wait a minute. Who doesn't have Twitter?
There might not be some people who have Twitter if they follow.
I guess.
But I will be, after the show is over, I will tweet out the 2 questions using the hashtag Dylan Knows. So follow me @Holodill, HOLIDILL. And I will tweet out the 2 questions, and you can answer them for me. You can give me your answers to the questions, and I will get you your prizes. Once again, for those who didn't catch on, we are doing a contest, and if you haven't been watching full, you probably aren't going to get it all because the answers have been revealed, but we just haven't revealed the questions yet. I will write the questions, and you will respond to them. The 2 prizes are a Godzilla IMAX poster, which was the Japanese art-looking one, and a page, either reproduction or an actual page from the Saved by the Bell comic book that's signed by, I believe, the writer and artist, which is, it might not be at your speed, but still it's kind of a neat contest thing. So once the show's over, I will tweet out the question, and you guys can, the questions, and you guys can answer it. So one per person. Well, you can answer them both, but we want to try to spread the wealth a little bit, have 2 separate people win it. So after that, what's coming up? This was a special episode of Dylan Knows. My regular show was on Sundays at 12:30 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. I will be doing another one tomorrow, in another 12, 13, about 13 and a half hours. I'll be on the air again. This time I'll be doing Dylan Knows Lists, which is my list show with Gigi Fletcher. Our topic tomorrow is going to be top 10 movies of 1984. 30 years ago. You'll be surprised. You may be surprised about what movies came out 30 years ago. And we will be revealing those choices to you. The next week after that will be Father's Day, the 15th, as my paranormal show. My usual co-host, Daphne Dew, I think is going to be taking a breather this month, so I'll be needing to find a new co-host for that. So I'll be looking around for new co-hosts for that. So if you want to talk paranormal, hey, hit me up on Twitter, and you might be able to be on the show. The week after that will be my birthday weekend. My birthday is June 20th. Send money, please. June 22nd will be our Dylan Knows International with my co-host from Canada, Bronwyn. We have a special guest slated already, and Kelly Toole, who is on Snark Radio. He is signed on to do the show on the 22nd. I'm probably going to get Tony Solo, who also does Snark Radio, to come on as well. Michael Fiverson says, give away the book Earth First.
Go.
I don't know.
Maybe
Check it out anyway.
Yeah.
And then, so Kelly Toole's already signed on to do Dylan Knows International. Tony Solo might be on there. They're both from Snark Radio, which is on every Thursday, 9 o'clock. Check them out also. You'll see the links in my Twitter feed as well. It's a great show. I've been on a number of times. MJ's been on a couple times. We just need to get DH on there now. So
Yeah, make it a party again.
And then I have our 5th Sunday, which would be the, let me see, I don't know, 30th, 29th, something like that, of June. Yeah, 29th. Yep. I don't know what I'm going to do yet. I've got a couple of options. Thinking maybe doing something maybe with Stephen King, possibly. Or I might do a Doctor Who thing. I haven't decided yet, but I got to decide soon because it's coming up really quickly. And then, July 4th weekend, July 6th, Sunday, July 6th, 12:30 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. MJ will be back, and we'll be doing Dylan Knows Comics, and we'll be talking comics. And as of now, we've got penciled in as our special guest is Moms Read Comics, Jessica, who does her own Google Hangout called Comicosity Hangout with Allison Berry and Karen Zarell. Every Monday at 9 o'clock. It's 3 women talking comics. They're better than we are because they're able to get comic creators on and ask them really cool questions.
But you have to start somewhere.
Yeah, we have to start somewhere. So
you guys are stuck with me, so yeah.
So we're going to have Jessica on to talk a little bit about Kamikaze Hangout, and also we're going to talk about favorite characters and which characters we would make movies out of from comic books. So should be a lot of fun, and that takes us through next month. We'll have DH on sometime again. We'll figure out time to get you back on, maybe hang out with us again sometime. It was
Sounds good,
it was
man.
a blast. Yeah. Heather T says I should do Doctor Who for my 5th Sunday, so maybe I will. It's a possibility because I've been watching. So, on that note, I think we're gonna close this up. This ends our Batman 75th anniversary episode. It was a blast. Two-parter, first two-parter I've ever done. So almost 4 hours worth of DH, MJ, and me. So. So sit down.
Close on 5, actually. Close to it.
Could be. So come on. So someday sit down and binge watch both episodes. There you go.
Netflix has nothing on us.
There you go.
So again, as soon as this the broadcast is going to end, I will tweet out the 2 questions, and I will reveal the winners maybe tomorrow if I get the responders in enough time. So you can watch the show tomorrow. If not, I'll tweet it out and we'll let everybody know. Okay. So on that note, farewell. Enjoy the rest of your evening, the weekend. MJ will be back with me in July. We'll get DH back on sometime as well. Go buy Earth First. Read it. You won't be sorry, even though I still haven't read it all yet. I like MJ. I've read his reviews on Amazon, and they're all glowing. So it's got.
Is it available on Kindle?
Yes. Yes. Uh-huh.
I'll get it for my tablet then. Perfect. Good deal.
Excellent. And MJ is working on the sequel, so
Correct.
Yeah, so that'll be out eventually. So on that note, we're going to shut this down, and I'm going to tweet out the questions. So if you were paying attention, you may win a prize. So for MJ Khan, for DH Gamer, I'm Dylan Lang, the mother effing Batman.
Yes, you are.
Happy birthday, Batman. 75
Have
years.
a good one. All right.
Bye.
I think we're still live. I don't know how to turn it off.
I don't know. I think if we just leave, it'll take care of it, though.
Okay. All right. I will talk to you later. I'm just going to hang up then.
All right. Sounds good, man. Take care.
Bye.